Welcome to part 2 of Poetry and Ambient Music. If you're here and you haven't yet seen part 1, please click above. If you have seen part 1 or you only want to watch part 2, then please keep watching. Poetry and Ambient Music, part 2. Part 1, repetition, variation, and rhythm. Ambient music is full of repetitions with slight variance happening over time, which is one of the ways that the better ambient music keeps your attention. I find it when I'm listening to it, it's like my mind keeps craving that sound again, and because of the slight variance, it doesn't get bored and it doesn't just fade away. It's like, play it again. Okay, we've got to the end of that cycle, play it again. It's probably kind of similar, like if you have a plant that flowers every year, you don't get bored of its flowers, you know. Ambient music, like poetry, is, and many other things, but consists of rhythm, and its rhythmicness is what keeps me in the right state of mind that I want to be in. The Irish poet and occultist W.B. Yeats had the following to say about rhythm. The purpose of rhythm, it has always seemed to me, is to prolong the moment of contemplation, the moment when we are both asleep and awake, which is the one moment of creation, by hushing us with an alluring monotony, while it holds us waking by variety, to keep us in that state of perhaps real trance, in which the mind, liberated from the pressure of the will, is unfolded in symbols. I often think of poems, especially lyric poems, as little atmospheres, that they're crafted by the mood or the tone that feels packaged in psychic energy or psychic weight, as I think Robert Blyott was, who would always talk about good poems containing a heft of psychic weight. And this weight exists inside its structure that, in a similar way to entering a house or a cave or a cathedral, entering into a poem can bring you into an immediate, near architectural atmosphere. And these atmospheres can help get us into that state of perhaps real trance that allows our minds to be unfolded in symbols, and when our mind is unfolding in symbols, our hands can translate those symbols into language, which is the skill of the poet, I think, is to see or feel or be aware of symbols and translate them so that they can go onto the page or onto the breath, so that when someone reads or listens, they receive and or dialogue with those symbols. Ambient music also is rightly deemed atmospheric. It is seemingly non-narrative and more about the emotion of the piece. Again, that doesn't mean there isn't narrative within the structure of the ambient music. That doesn't mean the artist didn't have a narrative in mind when they were creating it or co-creating a narrative alongside it, but the narrative is more driven by purely an emotional feeling rather than something that's more storied. And I think that's probably why it can help us, or me especially, access these symbols. And in the same way that listening to a piece of ambient music won't just give you, one feeling or one word or one interpretation, a symbol is a package of many different interpretations and meanings. That's why it's contained in a symbol. It's a way to group things together, and symbols can consistently be added to. I mean, I'm right now got a symbol on this top, Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail, which can be the process of the wheel of life or creation and destruction. I believe it's a Gnostic symbol, and it can gain resonance and meaning over time, and it can change based on an individual and on a circumstance, as well as hold cultural or mythic or religious weight also. As Baus explains, poetry resists achieving an oversimplified meaning via a single, instantaneous approach. Instead, a poem might be considered a place for readers and listeners to explore and more fully inhabit paradox, complexity, and contradiction within their perceptual network. Perhaps this paradoxical way of thinking can be helped by ambient music as it brings us deeper, because when we get closer to the essence of things, the more paradoxical they become. An example from physics can be the famous example of a photon of light before it's observed can simultaneously be a particle and a wave, and then upon observation its property is determined. And when we think in paradox, it deepens our experience of the mystery and what might be closer to the reality of things, which is one of the things Zen koans give us. For example, what is the sound of one hand clapping? That's not one hand. Conclusion. The poetry I'm interested in, and often the music I'm interested in, is something that takes me way beyond ego consciousness, something that can take me to those deeper realms where I can contemplate and think through emotional and spiritual issues and find that realization and light and guidance and inspiration and all those other things. And I find poetry and ambient music to both be good avenues to get into those states and to help contemplate. And I think that is what Baus was talking about when he described the drone music and poetry to be of similar sensory universes. I think there's a convergence happening between them, even though it's quite hard to express or languageify, if I can use a term like that, because it's not immediately apparent. So I guess my argument isn't that they are the same thing, but that they are somewhat complementary and come from a similar place. And I guess the most similar place that they're coming from is that dreamlike state. I find that that's what's crossing over between the two, or that's what's overlapping. And I also want music, in as much as I want poetry, to really soak into and engage with and dialogue with my body. I want to feel its physiological enactions within me. I want it to be embodied. We dealt with how poetry, according to neuroscience, affects the body in a previous video, which you can access somewhere at the top of the screen. In a world in desperate need of slowing down and calming down and finding more contemplative awareness, I want to ask you, as much as I'm asking myself, in what roles does things like ambient music and poetry and other things hold in a society and a culture that's trying to get us to go fast, 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 buy, like do, produce, do. Like, how can it let us slow down? How can it let us breathe and think more deeply to understand who we are and what we are in this world? And what do you think? Do you sit and listen to ambient music while you write, or any other music? Do you prefer having things be as near silent as possible? Do you think that music is distracting to writing, or do you think that there's something that's great when the two things are interrelated? And please let me know in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more videos about poetry, poets, and everything else. Your support is really helpful and motivates me to continue to grow this channel and make content that celebrates and discusses poetry and provides a platform for others to engage with it for free. So I really appreciate all your support. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and keep writing.